Yo guys, so today you join me in my RX8 again for another video. Hopefully today's video will be very helpful for anybody that's going to look and buy one of these. I'm gonna go through, I've basically written a not so little list of problems to look out for when going to buy an RX8. I had to write them down because I know I definitely would have forgotten some of them if I'd just done it off my head. So I've written them down to make sure I don't forget anything. And it's probably a good idea if you're ever going to buy one, and it's your first time buying one, maybe write your own list of problems to look out for, so that you don't forget to look for something when you're there. Because obviously when you're there you're under a little bit of pressure, and it's easy to forget stuff. It's a good thing to write down a list of things so you just don't forget. So basically the car I'm in now is an RX8. It's a 192 Nemesis edition, as you probably will have seen in my last video. If you haven't seen my last video, go check it out. I'll put it at the top of the screen now. But yeah, it's a 192, and I went to look at two others before I decided to buy this one. And paying more doesn't always mean you're going to get a better car, especially with these. These are so hit and miss. This was actually half the price of the others that I went to look at, and it's 100% better. So one thing I'd definitely advise if you're going to look at one, don't just go and look at one. Go have a look at a couple, go test drive a few, basically, because you'll know when you've got a nail. If you drive a good one and then drive a bad one, there's just a world of difference. A good one will be like one of the nicest cars you've ever driven, and a bad one will just feel like a rickety bag of nails. And it's strange, really, because a lot of the time a bad one, there won't actually be a lot wrong with it, but you can tell. When you've driven a good one, you can tell a bad one. So that's definitely one advice I'd give you, is don't just go and look at one. Go have a look at a couple, and the chances of you getting a good one are a lot higher if you've test drove a few. And the other thing I would suggest is lower mileage is generally better. So the lower mileage you can get, the more life you're going to get out of the engine that's in it, generally, if it's been well looked after. So the other thing is service history. I'd definitely try and get one with service history. If you get full service history, that's the best of anything, because as you know, these cars need servicing regularly. So if you've got proof that that's been done, there's a good chance that the engine's going to be in much better condition. Obviously you want to make sure that the coils have been done at the right time. You want to make sure it's had regular oil changes, had spark plugs changed, because obviously if you've got faulty ignition, that causes even more problems. So yeah, they're the main things I'd ask about before you go and buy them. The other thing is obviously ask if it's got hot start issues. If it doesn't start when it's hot, or if it really struggles to start when it's hot, it's probably not worth bothering even going to have a look at it, because it's going to cost you money, unless you're getting it dead cheap and your plan is to just get an engine rebuild. Then it's not too bad. But yeah, they're the main things that I would recommend. Yeah, they're the main things I would recommend doing before you go have a look at one. I'm just going to go find somewhere quiet to park now, and then we'll jump out. I'll show you around the car, and we'll walk around this list of problems to look out for, and hopefully this will help you when you go to buy an RX8, whether it's your first time or your third time. You might have had like 3 or 4. There might be things on this list that you don't know about, yeah, we'll just walk around them step by step and try and make it as easy as possible for you, because it is a bit of a minefield going to buy an RX8. So yeah, I'll go find somewhere quiet to park now and we'll walk around the car. then here's my list. It's a bit windy up here, but I'll try to keep everything as brief as possible just because there's a lot to get through. So we'll start from the outside. So basically the outside, your main issue is going to be rust. So under here on the wing, the bottom of the wing is a bad spot for rust, obviously, because like you get road salt and everything flicks up into that area, and then the sills can be quite bad, especially at the back corner again, like under here. So yeah, watch out for that. Another spot for rust as well is the third brake light on the boot. As you can, I don't know if it'll pick it, just here you can see it's starting a little bit on mine, but you'll tend to find a lot of like rust bubbling coming up around here. So that's that. And then you've got another problem is the tail lights fogging up. Mine are actually very good. It's probably the first one I've seen that doesn't actually have the problem. You'll probably find that most of the tail lights are fogged up. As you can see, mine are pretty decent. I'm guessing somebody's probably done something about that already. Basically, there's two ways to fix these. Best way is to get a new gasket. Put a new gasket in and it'll seal the light up. Sometimes it's not always coming in from the gasket. Sometimes it can leak in between the seal of the lens cover and the back of the tail light. So there's not a lot you can do with that really, unless you want to split the tail light and stuff, but it's a bit of a hassle. But yeah, obviously you just want to change the gasket, and if you're on a budget or you're planning on changing your tail lights and you just want to sort them out for now, I know a lot of people drill holes down into this black panel at the bottom, and basically that just lets any water drain out, and it drains and comes out on the outside instead of the inside. And then obviously if your gaskets are leaking at the back, there's a good chance it's leaking into your boot, so obviously check the boot as well. Wheels are pretty much always, if they've got the standard wheels on, there's a good chance that they've got quite a bit of curb rash. As you can see, the wheel actually sticks out a little bit more than the tyre. Obviously there's some tyres with like sidewall protectors, but most of them will be curb rash. It's buggery. Another thing to look out for is sticking brake calipers. As you can see, this one's just had a new caliper on it, basically because it was sticking. They're quite prone for sticking on these, the back ones as well, so just watch out for that. Obviously when you set off, if it's sticking, just make sure your brakes aren't binding all the time. Yeah, and I think that's it from the outside. There's not really a great deal wrong on the outside, but they're just things to look out for. They're not really problems, it's just old age more than anything else. And oh yeah, and the headlights tend, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but they're a bit misty, and basically the grit just gets ingrained in them, and you can clean them up. I will do a video on how to clean these up at some point, so make sure you subscribe to the channel for that when I get round to doing that. And then what else we got? So under the bonnet you've got, take the cover off, under the bonnet you've got where are we at? Let's start. So battery. You always want to make sure you've got a decent battery on it. If you have a battery that's not very good or doesn't hold much charge, you'll tend to find you'll really struggle to get them to start. They need to be turning over fast to start. A lot of them came with starter motors that weren't sufficient enough anyway, so when you've got a bad battery matched with that, there's a good chance you're not going to get it started, and if it doesn't start, there's a good chance you're going to flood it, and then it'll be even more difficult to start. So a bad battery can be an absolute nightmare, so just watch out for that. Starter motor. So with the starter motors, obviously they had a starter motor that wasn't good enough, basically, to begin with, and then they did a upgraded starter motor, which was a 14-tooth starter motor, yeah, which basically spun the engine over faster, which is a good thing. But beware, if somebody's selling a car that's just had the starter motor fitted, there's a good chance that they've fitted that to mask low compression issues, because obviously when you put a starter motor on, it spins it over faster. It can get it started, and it does mask some of the low compression issue. So just beware of that if it's just been fitted. I personally, if I was getting one that had just had a new starter motor on it, I'd probably get it compression tested, just for that reason, because obviously it's not worth buying one that's got low compression, even if it's running still, really, because you're going to have to spend money on getting it rebuilt at some point. So yeah, just beware of that. Coolant bottle, you'll tend to find when you go to a lot of them, this grey plug will be unplugged, and that is because basically what happens is the level sensor breaks in this, so you'll where's my keys? So you'll come to it, and I'll show you inside. So on the dashboard, that light there, the top one, the red one, that one will be on permanently if the level sensor's broken. And what a lot of people do is when it's broken and the level sensor's on all the time, obviously if it's on, check your coolant level first. If the coolant level's fine and it still stays on, then the coolant level sensor's broken. And a lot of people just unplug the plug and just don't have a coolant level sensor, which is fine because a lot of cars don't. Most cars don't have a coolant level sensor. So it's not a big issue really. But yeah, a lot of people will unplug this grey wire to sort the issue out, and just not have a coolant level sensor. And you can't buy the sensor separate, it comes as part of the bottle, so it's like 120 quid for the sensor. So just that's one thing to watch out for. It's a good bargaining thing if it has gone wrong. But yeah, there's that. What else we got? So yeah, and then obviously you've got low compression is one of the worst things. So obviously if it really struggles to start when it's hot, it's probably got low compression. So I wouldn't buy one that struggles to start when it's hot. The best thing to do is get a compression test if you're unsure. You can probably like rent or buy a compression test. Well, you can buy them for a few £100, or you can rent one off somebody off the forum, or borrow one off somebody if you know somebody with one. You can actually compression test them with a normal compression tester. It's just a bit more of a faff than using a proper rotary compression tester. I will do a video on that as well later down the line, on how to compression test them with a normal compression tester and a rotary one. Yeah, so you've got yeah, that's one thing to look out for. Obviously there's other things that go wrong with them, like rear bearing failure. You'll know what that is as soon as you start it up, because if you start it up, it'll just sound like an absolute bag of bolts. It's so loud. It's ridiculous. So yeah, there's no point in me going into that. If you start it up and it sounds like a bag of nails, you probably know not to buy it anyway. Oil cooler lines. So the oil cooler lines run down sides here and into the side of the engine. And they have a tendency to rust and start leaking. Not even like pouring oil out. Sometimes I'll just seep a little bit of oil out, and you'll notice it because usually there'll be a load of oil down this side of the engine. So they're really expensive. I'm sure they're at like 300 quid or something like that. So if that's just bear that in mind if you've got one with oil cooler lines, because it's an expensive fix, even if you fix it yourself. Secondary air pump is here. So this secondary air pump, basically the job of that is it pumps fresh air into the cat. Basically it helps it warm up faster, and it helps lower the emissions, which is a bit of a pikey way of doing things, I think, but they were the same on the RX7 as well. The RX7 had a secondary air pump, and yeah, basically just pumps fresh air into the exhaust to try and lower your emissions and warm your cat up a little bit more. And then obviously the other things to look out for is the breather system. So a lot of the time you'll come out to these and these will be disconnected because of the little plastic elbows are snapped and stuff. And another thing is, if you overfill the oil, what happens is basically the breather, the oil will come out of the breather pipe and go straight into your intake, and basically you'll get oil in your intake. It'll contaminate your MAF sensor, and the car probably won't start again, or it'll run really badly depending on how much oil goes through. So a lot of people will just half fill their, like, get their oil to the half in between the minimum and maximum point on the dipstick and not fill it all the way to the top, for that reason, because if you're cornering hard on something and it sloshes and it goes up into your intake, it causes a bit of an issue. So it's not really something to look out for, but it's just like, don't rag the hell out of it if you've got your oil levels full, because that's probably going to happen. A good thing to do to prevent that from happening is putting an oil catch tank in, so that you can then fill the oil all the way to the full, and then if it does slosh, it goes into your tank rather than into your intake. What else we got? Catalytic converters are a big problem on these. They usually fail because of the ignition coils have failed first, or a spark plug or something like that, something in the ignition system, and then it'll block the cat up. But yeah, just be careful with the cats, they can be blocked up. You'll probably usually be able to tell because it won't run very well. But a lot of people take the cats out and stuff, so just watch out for people putting decats in, because then you'll struggle to get it through an MOT unless you know somebody that can, yeah, wiggle it through for you. Yeah, what else we got? So yeah, cat, and then obviously you've got your ignition coils. They're a big problem. It's good to, if the car's got a bit of service history, it's good to see when the ignition coils have been changed, because they do need changing at a certain point. I can't remember when it is, but they need changing. They actually have 3 revisions of the ignition coil, so the first 2 weren't very good, and the third one is okay. But if you've got a car with D585, is it 585? Yeah, the uprated ignition coils anyway, they've got lifetime guarantee on them. So if you get to a car and they've got them on, that's an absolute bonus, because you just don't have to worry about the ignition coils for the rest of its lifetime. Yeah, what else we got? And then obviously if somebody's had one of these and just driven it to and from work, it's not the best. These cars need a bit of a thrashing now and again, so don't be scared of buying one from somebody if it's been tracked, or if they've driven it hard, because there's a good chance that engine's actually probably more healthy than than the person that's had one and just like gone to the shop and back in it, because basically they get full of carbon if they're not driven hard, and causes more engine issues internally. So them being driven hard isn't a bad thing, as it would be with a lot of other cars, so just that's okay. And then what we got so much to go through. There's so much on this list. Yeah, so gearbox wise, you've got your let's jump in here. Mine's actually okay on this, but you'll tend to find clutch release bearing are quite common for going on these. generally they'll drive for ages with the clutch release bearing gone on them anyway, but like making noise on them anyway. I know a lot of people put like aftermarket clutch kits in, the bearing will start like making noise after a few like 100 miles, but they go for ages. But yeah, it's just something to look out for. Basically it'll make a noise, and if you put your clutch pedal down and that noise disappears, that's your release bearing. And then obviously when you lift the clutch pedal back up, the noise will start again. So that's one thing to look out for. And then the gearboxes on these can be a bit crunchy if they've been driven like not even hard, but they get to a point where they're a bit notchy. They can crunch now and again. Usually at high revs, you'll tend to find that most of them will drive fine at low revs, but if you take them up to the higher rev range, like especially like second is usually the most common one, because that's the one everyone slams into when they're accelerating. So the synchros can go in some of the gears, and it's good when you're on the test drive just to take it high up into the rev range and change gear, just to make sure that the gears don't crunch. There's not a lot you can do about it. If they have, you just need a gearbox rebuild or a new gearbox, or you just live with it. So there's that. What else we got on here? White smoke. So if you start it up and it's got a load of white smoke, especially when cold, there's a good chance that the water jacket seals have failed. Yeah, basically it kind of just works like a head gasket. So you'll get you'll start it up cold, and you'll just get plumes and plumes of white smoke out the back of the exhaust. That's usually a water jacket seal failure. You'll tend to find when they get warm, the seals will start sealing up because of the heat, and the smoke will start to go away, and obviously the engine's running hotter, so it will burn some of the water off, but it'll seem like the head gasket's gone. You'll see it smokes like mad, so you'll know when one of those has happened. It's not that common, but it's something that can happen. What else we got? Yeah, and then yeah, obviously the hot start issues. I'll try and get hold of a bad one at some point and do a video on the difference between a good starting one and a bad starting one, because basically you'll know as soon as you get in. It isn't right when you get a bad starting one. It'll take like 4 or 5 seconds to get going, or even longer, and it's just a bit of a nightmare. So one thing that I've just realised I forgot to put in the list, which is quite a big one, is engine mounts and gearbox mounts. They're quite common for going. They sag over time. Basically the best way to you can tell slightly from driving them, especially if the gearbox mount's gone, because you'll if you let off the throttle quite harshly, the gearbox will move quite a bit. You'll feel it in your hand if you have your hand on the gear stick, or you'll be able to see it moving a lot of the time. But sometimes it is good to just take a jack with you and jack it up and just get a bar in between the mounts and just make sure they're not knackered. Yeah, there's not they're not a big job to do really, but it's quite an annoying problem when they do go, because obviously it knocks and bangs. It doesn't drive quite as smoothly as it should. So yeah, I just finished filming and then realised that I'd forgot to put that in. So yeah, just bear that in mind when you go to look at one. Yeah, so I think that's everything. Like I say, it's really good to have service history and everything in with it. Service history is kind of like the main thing you really want to look for, because that'll tell you if it's been looked after properly, because the reason that these cars die is because they're not looked after. So just, yeah, bear that in mind. Yeah, obviously, if you get one, if you get one and it seems good and it's not got service history, the best thing to do is get a compression test on it. If you can get hold of a compression tester and compression test any of them, that's the best thing to do, because full service history doesn't always guarantee the engine's going to be okay. It's just a good indicator that it's been well looked after. And obviously do your research, like I'm guessing you're watching this video because that's what you're doing, but just go on the forums, ask a few questions. Stay away from Facebook, because you just generally get a lot of people on there that don't really know what they're talking about commenting. Obviously there is people that do know what they're talking about, but when you're new to the car, it's difficult to tell the difference between the two. So go onto the forums. There's generally like a couple of people on there that will know more than most people, and you'll be able to tell because they comment on a lot of the posts. So yeah, just do your research. Make a list. That's a really good thing to do, because you can go with your list. You've got something to check off while you're there, so that you don't miss anything. Because like I said earlier, that when you're there viewing a car, you're under a little bit of pressure and it's easy to forget stuff. So yeah, just bear that in mind. And that's the end of the Mazda RX8 buyer's guide video. Hopefully it's been very helpful for you. If you think I've missed anything out, make sure you drop it in the comments, and if there's anything you'd like, any questions you'd like answering, just drop it in the comments. I'll answer that, as many as I can. And yeah, catch you in the next video, and make sure you give it a like if it's been helpful for you, and subscribe to the channel, because I'll definitely be doing some more RX8 videos. Yeah, peace out. Thanks for watching.